Welcome to the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. This podcast and Outthinker's peer network provide a platform for the architects of corporate success, chief strategy officers, to collaborate and share their unique experiences in tackling complex challenges, navigating disruptive technologies, and driving impactful growth. Today's guest is Michael Drexler, Chief Strategy Officer at Brightstar Capital Partners, a private equity firm that invests in closely held middle market businesses and helps them scale into professional, process-driven organizations. Michael's career spans leadership roles across investment banking, global strategy, and private equity, from Barclays to the World Economic Forum and Brightstar Capital Partners, giving him a rare perspective on how strategy functions evolve as companies mature from founder-led to institutional scale. In this conversation, we unpack lessons from Michael's career leading strategy functions and explore how the head of strategy role transforms along a company's growth journey. We cover things like how strategy evolves typically from a chief of staff role in founder-led companies to a full-fledged internal consulting function. The mindset shift from advising a single CEO to influencing a broader leadership team. How to build and sustain an effective strategy team, including Michael's 2 to 4 year rotation and no bad news for 2 weeks rules. Why private equity firms view internal strategy functions differently, and how to reposition your team in a PE environment. Michael's 4-step framework for prioritizing projects. What projects should you take on? Which should you decline? Framework that has never failed him once. Michael brings clarity and practicality to what it means to be an effective CSO. Whether you're scaling a strategy office or navigating a private equity transition, this episode is packed with frameworks, stories, and real-world business lessons that you can apply right away. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I know that you've got a hectic schedule. Where are you joining us from today?
Joining from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Nice.
Our second office is at Brightstar Capital Partners.
Okay, great. Let's just kind of start off, I think, with this growth as a company evolves. When there's one CEO, maybe they're the founder, and strategy kind of sits in their head. When I talk about the strategy role to smaller companies, smaller, I mean like 30 million, 100 million, not small. They're like, well, why would anyone need an expert to do that? You just do it, right? It's kind of like, I think, cleaning your house when you have an apartment and then cleaning your hotel when you have a hotel, you know? So maybe walk us through how you characterize what strategy is or where it sits between those two.
Yeah, and you've hit the nail on the head. Smaller companies are very much about individuals, often about the CEO, the founder. And they're very lucky if they have a formalized strategy department. Normally, who is the head of strategy is usually also the chief of staff. They're an advisor to the CEO, the founder. They're a troubleshooter for special initiatives. It's very early days, and obviously they don't have big organizational structures yet. And you see the same story across all other functions of the company. So the finance department might be the former family business accountant who's now called CFO, but they don't really have financial planning and analysis yet. Might have a little bit of a budgeting process, but not a team that does it. And so it's very fluid, very early. And in our portfolio companies at Brightstar, we see this a lot when we buy a founder-owned business. Mm-hmm. Then comes the journey, of course, and the end game between the early stage, fluid, very people, individual driven organization is, of course, for the large company, the process driven, functional, fully grown organization where you have divisional heads, you have functional heads, you have an executive committee, you have all these governance and leadership mechanisms that we know from public companies. The journey, if one is lucky enough to be a head of strategy in a small company or a chief of staff or whatever the name is, they get to shape that journey. So they probably at some point, either prodded by the private equity company or not, will think about what's the org structure for a business twice our size going to be like? And how do we build that? What are the processes? What are the functional competencies needed? What are the key hires needed? And somebody who's lucky enough to be head of strategy in a smaller firm will get to shape that story together with the founder. Now, where it gets interesting is they will then have to reshape themselves as well from basically a chief of staff, an advisor, a special initiatives person, to somebody who runs what I believe a strategy function in a large company is, which is an in-house consulting function. Chief of staff side might stay with it, might not. There might be a new chief of staff coming in. And of course, the team of one that is normally strategy in a small company will become a team of 3 and then a team of 5 and maybe a team of 10. It's all dependent on what's the workload and what's the demand for projects. And so that's the real journey from individual focus to function focus and to professional organization, and strategy is both part of that journey and shapes it. Mm-hmm. Then what happens in the end game, of course, this is a very personal thing. Again, strategy ultimately sits with the CEO, but in a small company, it's probably only the CEO and the head of strategy. In a larger company, the CEO makes the ultimate call, but it's an executive committee, or a management committee, a collection of the leadership team below the CEO that is instrumental in strategy and in being stakeholders. And that has to be grown. And the head of strategy needs to understand that it's going to move away from focus on just one person to focus on a wider set of stakeholders in the larger organization.
So I'm hearing kind of two things for a rationale for kind of this professionalization of stuff that was done and distributed in different places. One is you have projects, and I'm guessing like projects are things that you start and end, as opposed to ongoing operations. And as you grow, you're probably starting and ending more things. But then I'm also hearing that there's maybe sort of an economy of scale of now you have enough need for certain expertise.
Yes. And some of it is also natural, like the larger the organization, the more difficult change management becomes. And so in a small company, I don't need change management capability really, because it's the CEO saying, let's do this, and everyone mucks in. In a larger organization, you get the usual corporate politics, and all of a sudden change management skills become something you need to build and arguably you need in a strategy function.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about that change management effort. And when you are a founder or a single CEO, the power rests with the CEO, and you can basically borrow that power and you can use as an influencing tactic someone else's power. How does that change when a company gets larger?
So fundamentally, you can still do it, but it's something you should use very sparingly, because let me give you an example from my time in investment banking. I could go to one of the divisional heads and say, my CEO wants you to do this. And more often than not, they would say, yeah, fine. But I've built no credibility with that. I've just been in between. And the worst situation is the one where they say, well, actually, I don't agree. And I'm going to talk to him directly now. And by the way, I'm the biggest revenue producer here. So ultimately, he's not going to want to piss me off. And so the power dynamics in larger organizations become more nuanced. And so while you can still run linear power and borrowed power, as he put it, it's usually the last resort, as they say, violence is the last resort of the incompetent. And in many ways, that applies to that situation, which is sort of a threat of violence coming from the top. The right answer would be, I have a relationship with that divisional head. We agree on something that needs to be done, and it doesn't need the mandate of the CEO.
Yeah. So then what is the answer then? I'm thinking also in terms of maybe the average lifetime of a CEO decreases as a company gets larger.
Yeah.
What's the risk and what's the answer?
The risk is if the CEO goes and you're only aligned with the CEO, then you go shortly afterwards. To me, that leads to a strong belief I have in that a head of strategy has to be neutral to all stakeholders until the very end. And I'll give you an example. At Barclays, we had a divisional head who insisted into the financial crisis that we double down on investment in their business unit that was at the time making big losses. And the trade-off was might turn the corner, that business unit, or it might drive the bank under. We decided against driving the bank under. And obviously at that point, you stop being neutral and you don't care whether he's pissed off at you. But until then, the principle should be you have no favorites. You work equally for everyone and you have everyone's interest in mind. When the CEO goes, the rest of the executive committee will go, this head of strategy that we've got, she's very useful. Let's keep her.
Yes. Give us a little more flavor there, because what I'm kind of hearing is when you say we have no favorites, you are serving in the interest of the company, any of the division heads, careful not to be perceived as aligning politically, but, for strategic reasons or because it's important for the company, maybe there's some areas that are more important. And then I guess it's also, if you're an internal consulting firm, you also, almost like a consulting firm, you need to generate your own work, not because you're just looking for busy work, but you need to have permission to work on what's important.
That I find is very easy when you have no favorites or no enemies or no politics, because you're being seen as useful in everyone's interest equally. And then the so-called sales pitch, which makes life for everyone on the team much easier, is you're free. So when I worked at McKinsey, I always had this equation that said at McKinsey you work maybe 90, maybe 100, maybe 110% on solving the client's problem. You spend another 40% trying to source the next study.
Right.
In an organization where you're an in-house strategy team, that sourcing effort doesn't need to happen because the phone will ring. And that's very helpful. It's also, in this instance, when the phone rings, you should also almost never say no. Or let me put it the other way, you should always pick up the phone, because if you don't pick up the phone, precious time goes a waste, the project gets escalated, and at some point you get it directly from the CEO, but with 3 weeks less time than if you had picked up the phone in the first place.
How does it 3 weeks later come back from the CEO?
Because the divisional head will go, Michael doesn't talk to me about this project, and
Gotcha.
I need it done, and I know who he answers to.
Yeah, I gotcha.
It's a colossal waste of time, this, but I've seen strategy heads do that, and it always ends particularly badly for their teams, who then have to scramble to make up for the lost time.
Yeah, I guess the first stage is, you are serving the CEO, and then as you grow, you need to expand your stakeholder network, both to be more effective and to keep your pulse on what the problems really are in the company. Let's talk about the team then. Like you talked about, you go from a team of 1 to a team of 3. Any tips that you have for us in that regard?
Yeah, for sure. I believe strongly that strategy, with very few exceptions, isn't a career path. I guess I should look in the mirror and go, I failed. I think by and large, the best career path is a 2 to 3 year period in the function, followed by a role in the business. And when you talk to most consultants, that's usually what they want to do. They want to have a P&L role when they leave consulting. And so this 2 to 4 year period is an excellent step of getting to know an organization. And then at the end of that getting to know each other period, you step into a role that opens up. You might have even created it yourself with a divisional head that knows you really well, and the wind is totally in your sails. So that's from a career perspective. And I have a general career advice piece there that says, if you have rows and columns, and the rows are functional skills and the columns are companies or organizations, never move diagonally across that chessboard. Always move either with the same role to a different company, or in the same company with a different role. That way you always keep one thing constant, and that's what you can fall back on, and you never lose your footing completely.
You don't have as long a learning curve or adaptation curve.
So that's the personal career perspective, why I think the 2 to 4 year period is useful. The second bit why it's useful is from a functional perspective. If I'm hiring consultants and I replace the consultant who just went into the business with a new consultant, I get access to new talent, I get access to new frameworks, I get access to the latest thinking, and functionally, I keep rejuvenating myself.
Yeah, that would be so interesting for me to work with a recent consultant graduate. When I was at McKinsey, I was hand drawing charts and scanning them and sending them to report production. And I got to imagine it looks so different now. What's your experience working with fairly recent former consultants, and how has that changed?
Yeah, you don't outsource the chart drawing anymore because most people can do it in PowerPoint themselves now. The tools have become good enough. But I will still say there is two types of consultants. There's the ones who, and same by the way, is true for investment bankers or private equity people or many others. There are the ones who, as they get more senior, don't want anything to do with nuts and bolts of their work anymore and just want to lead and delegate. Then there are the ones who still keep connected and almost regret that they can't do the charts themselves anymore. It's the latter type that I prefer in a strategy role, because in a company, you're almost always at the coalface. You don't have the partner representing you with the steering committee. In order to be really effective and build the relationships, you have to be in the moment. You have to be with the stakeholders. And it's therefore easier if you're what I call a vertically integrated consultant, where you can be both the partner and the associate on the same project.
I'm kind of visualizing, instead of the division head with CEO's approval throwing a project at you and your team is working on it and then they give a report, it's more of an integrated experience. How do you engineer that so that it is more collaborative?
There's two ways of doing that. One is they might be your own alumni. So again, because you place people after 2 to 4 years, after a while, you actually have a really nice alumni network.
Which is very much the consulting model. Interesting.
Then these alumni will informally give you a heads up about projects, and you then get formal sign off from the division head, but it's all said and done. So that's one way. The other way is when you hire consultants and you hire only consultants, you still risk being like the ivory tower or the McKinsey or the Bain tower inside a company. The way to get around that is you find high potential talent in the various divisions and you say, hey, rather than 2 to 4 years, you come and join my team for 6 to 12 months. And what we get from you is a real deep understanding of the business. What you get from us is that magical thing called the consulting skill set. Mm-hmm. I'm a strong believer that the consulting skill set is very valuable and very differentiated. Mm-hmm. And I'm also very strongly believing that it's not unique to these chosen few called consultants, and anyone can pick this up. Some of my best alumni with the best careers after my function have been those secondments.
So it's almost as if part of your capability needs to be to engage and develop and teach these consulting skills.
That's right.
Interesting. How do you get good at that, or how do you know that you're good at that?
You're good at it when you see they pick up the skills and they do great projects with it. You have to see the other person for what they're worth. You got to be a good teacher, obviously. You got to have empathy. And you have to appreciate that while their language might be different, their brain is just as good as yours.
Yes.
It's not about the jargon. It's about what's behind the jargon.
So now I'm kind of visualizing you've gone from one person to a team of 3 to now a team of more than 3. And then we multiply that by these secondments and these partnerships. And now you are starting to actually manage a firm. Any tips for managing that flow of coordination?
So I have 2 tips on that which relate directly to the team. One is the information flow inside the team. What I found very useful is a weekly team meeting. You spend 20% of the time on project and progress updates, and you spend 80% of the time on here's what we're seeing on the ground, what the organizational dynamics are, what the personal dynamics are. So-and-so seems a little bit hard to work with, or they're set in a certain way. And as the team shares that information, you can call it a glorified gossip session, but allows you to keep a pulse on the organization, on the firm, spot where there are weak spots, where there are strong potential talent. You can also, over time, gives you an idea of what your team sees, what they don't see. If you then meet the divisional heads, you hear one story, you hear another story from your team. That allows you to intervene and pick up the dissonance. Mm-hmm. Embrace the gossip, I found incredibly useful.
Great. Embrace gossip. And the other tip?
In my view, if I hear no bad news for more than 2 weeks, I know my team is bullshitting me and they're upward managing me. I was very clear about this message with my team. If I hear from no one for more than 2 weeks that there is bad news, I know you guys are taking me for a ride and I don't like that. Please give me bad news at least once every 2 weeks.
Interesting. How do you react to bad news to encourage that?
The right way is you don't shoot the messenger. You immediately thank them and say, Kai-Han, I'm really grateful that you shared this with me because we can now do something about it. And now comes the second step. This is not on you. This is clearly a problem that's too big for one single person to deal with or to solve. As leaders, we have this tendency to go, oh yeah, it's a real big problem, but here is how you fix it. And if I do that, I immediately go, Kaihan, you're just not good enough. Look, I just have this in seconds. And so what you have to do is the second step after thanking for the bad news, you have to say, this is too big for you and for me alone. So we have to find a process how we get all of the best eyes on this problem. We'll schedule an hour with either the whole team or a subset of the team, and we're going to dedicate that hour to solving that problem and dealing with that bad news. What you do with that is you encourage the bad news and you make it from a shameful event to an almost celebratory event that gets the best of the team because it deserves that. And people see this in action 2-3 times and then it becomes a no-brainer.
I love it. We're talking about problems to work on. How do you know which problems you guys should be working on? Because now you're getting a flow of big problems as you have more alumni embedded, you have better relationships with stakeholders, former ensconcement partners bringing you things. How do you filter through and decide what to prioritize?
What I found useful there is that's the point when you can start delegating, and you as the functional head, as the strategy head, can dedicate more time to the senior relationship building, and you don't have to look at every single project all the time. And so I've given my teams a 4-step framework to this. And I said, steps 1 to 3, anyone can do. Step 4, I need to get involved.
I love it. I want to hear.
Step 1 is it good for the firm? So is it a project that creates value on revenue, cost, or company valuation? So is it good for the firm? If the answer to that is yes, it's a good start. Comes the next question. Step 2, is it good for the team? Is it something we enjoy doing? Does it grow our skill base? Is it aligned with our capabilities and our interests? So step 2 answers the question, does it set up for success?
What happens if answer 1 is yes and answer 2 is no?
Then you need to have a conversation that's when it comes to me, and you need to have a conversation with the sponsor of the project that says, I want to do this, but I'm not sure I can.
Okay.
And the solution to the gap might be a secondment from their side. It might be we actually have to hire an outside expert or a consulting firm. But if you can't answer 2 with a yes, you know there is trouble brewing and you can't ignore it.
Okay.
Step 3 is then, is it something only the strategy team can do? And I always called this the lazy COO clause, because if it's, oh yeah, you guys know how to do PowerPoint, my answer to that was always, yes, we do, but so does your intern.
Yeah, I can see that, being a slippery slope. And I've seen that before where the strategy ends up being just sort of give them all the work that takes a lot of work, or they work hard. And so you end up not being able to have control over your workflow.
Yes. And you end up being body shocked, and that then has bad repercussions for the team culture. So that's the third bit. If the answer is yes to all 3 of them, my rule was always anyone on the team can source a project, take it on. If they have bandwidth, they've just become their first consulting partner, they've sourced something, they're now running with it, it's great. Now, if the answer to any of the 3 first questions is a no, then that's where step 4 comes in. They have to see me. And I say, can we fix it? If we can fix the no and turn it into a yes, that's great. But sometimes you can't, particularly around the body shopping. And then my get out of jail was always, is it for somebody who we've never worked with before, but they're a real high potential and we know that they're going to be in the executive committee 2 years from now. So we're basically earning ourselves the way in through a favor. And we're willing to do that, and we're conscious to do that, and then it's fine. And then the pain is just less of a pain because we know we're doing it consciously.
Got it.
That framework, 13 years of head of strategy, never failed me once.
Is it good for the firm? Is it good for the team? Is it something only the team could do? And then you have this get out of jail clause. Love it. Who do you think the strategy officer should report to? The CEO or the CFO or somewhere else?
So I have a funny story on that because my first role as global head of strategy at Barclays, I owed to everyone outside insisting that they report to the CEO. And when no one outside was coming because the line was into the CFO, the firm finally gave me the chance and said, Michael, we might as well take you. And I've never looked back. And the most important question was, will the CEO see me whenever I say I need their time? That to me is the only thing, because if the CEO says no to that question, it means strategy is not an organizational priority and you probably should look for another place. But who your day-to-day line manager is doesn't really make a difference as long as you have access to the CEO.
Oh, I see.
There's often a conflict between strategy and finance, and you often struggle to resolve it when they're in two different silos.
I like that, because I could see like the three areas where you probably see the most kind of overlap or conflict with finance would be KPIs, resource allocation, and M&A activity. Take M&A activity, like how do you work with that group of the finance people who often have industry expertise and they have perceived overlapping skills?
To me, it's very simple. And it's, by the way, the same strategy that works with almost all the other functions. It's respect their expertise and know what your expertise is versus theirs, and then make it a complementary effort. So to your point, the M&A corporate development team, they will know how to run deals far better than most strategists ever will. They will know the financial or the KPI side of competitors very well, but they will not know the business model, the operating side of it. As long as you know what you're good at and you respect what the other side is good at, everything flows and it becomes a collaborative effort and the firm wins. And also, if that's the issue that you only get pulled in after the fact, it's very easy to say, hey, if you're expecting me to run post-merger integration, which you should, we have to get an early read on what that should be. So I need to get involved and help you with formulating the synergies and how we get to the synergies. The more concrete you can be on the value creation plan, the more everyone wins and the easier the deal becomes.
I know many chief strategy officers who were the subject of M&A and they were acquired by private equity. And I hear over and over again, the experience of operating in a PE-owned environment is very different than a corporate, whether that corporate is public or not public. You've worked in both. So I would love to hear what your view is in dissecting what the differences are.
Yes, and this can be very transformational, to use a neutral term. So assume you're in a corporate, assume it's a larger company already, and you've built this internal consulting team. And you have these new private equity owners and they go, you have what? You have an in-house consulting team of 20 people. In a private equity person's mindset, that translates into overhead. PE folk are usually very proud that they know strategy very well. And it's usually the deal partner who knows where the company should go. And why do I need 20 people to help me with that? So you're already on a losing foot. The second bit is, PE folk love to employ consultants because what they can do is the cost of a consultant becomes what's known as an add back to EBITDA. And for the future valuation of the company, it doesn't matter. So in the PE mindset, external consultants are for free. And of course, they have a brand name, which internally you don't. So here is my advice to the chief strategy officer getting caught out in that. Pivot as quickly as you can to M&A. And if that means getting corp development under you, then do it. Otherwise, place the team as quickly as you can into the line roles of the business and reduce it down to 2 or 3 people, because that's what will resonate.
Tell me more about that, why that will resonate with the PE folks.
Because many PE firms build their value creation on M&A. And what it does is, let's say I have a company, say 500 million in revenue, and it's in a fragmented market, and I acquire that company at a 10 times EBITDA.
Yep.
Then by another 10 companies at 50 million of EBITDA, double the size of my business. But because each of them is only 50 million, I get them at a much lower price. So just by making the acquisition, I have a guaranteed value creation of 5 times to 10 times.
Right.
My advice would therefore be repivot the team to M&A. And then once you're publicly listed, once you're outside the PE paradigm, arbitraging against external consultants becomes more important again. And then you rebuild the internal consulting team.
Got it. Let's go back to the non-PE example. How big should a strategy office be? Because I know some strategy offices that are just 3 people or 1 person, even if they're multi-billion dollars. And I know some that are like 50 people.
Other than the personal opinion of the CEO,
right,
it depends on what the consulting spend is that the company would have otherwise. In full disclosure, my team at Barclays was over 50 people, and to some people that might be crazy. But here is what happened. Every year, I had a conversation with my executive committee that went along the following lines. With 50 people, we ran 150 projects that last year, and assume 50% of those projects, so 75 of them were self-generated just because we were here. People thought of us, they gave us work. But let's say 75 were what the company would have run without us using external consultants. 75 projects times $500 an hour times 40 hours a week times 48 weeks a year, that gets you to $25 million. That means we have saved with our team, the firm, 25 million in consulting spend.
Wow.
Our own cost base was, call it 7 million, a third of that, and everyone's happy.
Yes.
When the strategy function is 100 people, probably the CEO would go, nah, that feels wrong. We got to be more selective on the projects that we do, and that's okay. But until then, I always found it useful to benchmark against consultants and not put an artificial cap. 50 is probably at the top end of things, but for a large global bank, not unreasonable. And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Because I hear CSOs often contemplate that. Maybe I'll ask you to just leave us with some suggestions of your favorite resources or books or frameworks. Like what are some of your go-to that listeners might look up?
So we'd have another hour just for me to list all the stuff I read.
We could do that another podcast. We can do that.
It's important to read a lot of things that are not work related, because I find you get a lot of your mental inspirations from reading books like The 3-Body Problem, and you go, what does humanity do in the face of another civilization? And makes you a somewhat broader thinker. Or you read things like No Shortcuts to the Top by Ed Vistos, and you go, mountaineering has a completely different view on risk management. But I won't go there. I'll give you just strategy stuff. And that list will be topped by Playing to Win by H.E. Lafley and Roger Martin. My second would be On Strategy, the compendium by Harvard Business Review. I'd then recommend The Private Equity Playbook by Adam Coffey. Winning Moves by Dan Kremens, which is 105 value creation tactics.
Very interesting.
9 Lies About Work by Marcus Buckingham, which is very contrarian on talent management and organization, but very good. And then I'll veer slightly off and say Fooled by Randomness by Nicholas Taleb. Gives you humility. And the last one is very timely, and it's Advanced Prompt Engineering for Everyone by Vanderbilt University on Coursera.
So that's not a book, that's a course.
It's a course. And if any of the listeners Googles it, you need to pick the one with 5 modules, not 3 modules.
Okay. Oh, this is great. I'm particularly intrigued by the winning moves, 105 winning moves. I have to look that up.
Little tip for that book, feed it as knowledge base into a custom GPT.
And
have the AI pick the moves for you.
Wow. I want to see how you do that. That sounds like an oracle, like a strategy oracle. Amazing. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a real pleasure. And here's to many more.
Yes, to many more. Thank you, Michael, for taking the time to chat with us today. And thank you for listening to the Chief Strategy Officer podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please rate, comment, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. To learn more about how CSOs use Outthinker to accelerate their impact, visit us at outthinker.com.